Come for the bread, stay for the politics. I'm Ben Walsh, and this is Let's Make Bread. This week on Let's Make Bread, we are making a delicious artisan loaf, but we're also trying to do things a little differently this week. I'm very interested to see if you notice the difference and whether you like it. All right, let's get started.
So this is weird, I'm doing this for the first time. First, we're going to take some yeast and put it in our bowl. We have 2 teaspoons of yeast. Next, we're putting in our flour. We've got 3 cups of bread flour. And we're just pouring that in there. Next up is going to be our salt. We're going to do 2 teaspoons of that. But as you know, I like to be a little fast and loose with my salt, so I don't measure it. But I do highly encourage you to measure yours. Because this recipe is so simple and there aren't a ton of ingredients in it, I highly recommend that you measure your salt if you want a distinct flavor. Just mixing that all together before we add our water, and now I'm creating a little well under which our water is going to go. And this is the warm water, so we have 1.5 cups of water at about 110 degrees. Now again, you want to make sure you're not killing the yeast with the heat on this water. And now we are just mixing this together to make sure that we have a really wet dough. Now it just so happens that I had put too much flour in here, so that's why you see me trying to get some more water out of my very empty dish. And actually I made a mistake because this is not supposed to be kneadable. So you see that I'm about to hit this with a hand knead, and I'm really not supposed to do that. So don't do that. It needs just make sure your dough is wet enough. Now at this point we can still recover from the dough that we have. I'm clearly trying to do that myself, but it looks like we are going to need some more water. So if you are adding water to yours, you want to make sure that the water that you're adding is the appropriate temperature. So don't have to be exact with this, just make sure that your temperature is warm, and again, not too hot so you're not killing your yeast. My microwave has just gone off, so let's add some warm water. And again, like all ingredients, we're going to add this a little bit at a time. Now, we're looking for a very specific consistency, and I'll point out to you when we get it. Clearly, we don't have it yet, and I just keep mixing this around. So, as I say in other recipes, essentially what's going to happen is when you're trying to rehydrate a dough, you just need to be very vigilant with it. Remember, we're doing this instead of kneading. All right, you can see that I've added some moisture to it, but clearly not enough. So we are adding a little bit more water and trying again. Unfortunately, this is not going to be enough water either, and even after a lot of vigorous stirring, I'm going to have to try and do this again. Now you can see I have a lot of bread kind of coming up on the side of the bowl, and the dough is now moister, but it still isn't wet enough. So we're going to put some more water in and just keep trying. Now I'm vigorously mixing this flour and this water to try and incorporate this, and a lot of it's getting stuck to the side of the bowl. Don't worry about that just yet. We can still get it off. So now we're able to get a little bit more on. So we're really, really close. We're just going to add a tiny bit more water here. Oh, no, we're not. We're going to get down the sides of the bowl and then move on to our next step.
All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to cover this for 2 to 3 hours until it's doubled in size. Once we do that, we're going to immediately throw it in the refrigerator overnight. It says to do 8 hours, but I think overnight's going to be great. What this is going to do is it's going to allow us to develop some flavor and to make sure that our dough gets a nice cold rise in there so it's easier to handle when we're working with it tomorrow. And when we're working with it tomorrow, we will talk some politics. So I will be right back.
So I'm trying to get I'm struggling, and I cannot figure out why I cannot get the cling film on. All right, so I finally got my cling film on. Thank goodness. All right, so the next thing I need to do is get my tea towel, which I conveniently forgot. We're just going to put that on top of our bread now and get moving.
All right, so remember, set a timer for 2 or 3 hours until this doubles in bulk, and then put it right in the fridge overnight. All right, I'll be back in the morning. Welcome back, everybody. This is, now that we have had our bread in the fridge overnight, we are going to take it out of its container, and then I'm going to show you what to do with it next and how we are going to prepare to bake this beautiful bread loaf.
So the first thing we need to do is take it out of the bowl. You can see I'm putting down a little bed of flour and just creating a nice floured work surface. I'm going to get this out with my fingers, and then I'm going to switch to a bread scraper. If you don't have a scraper, just use anything that you can put some flour on and push this out of the bowl. Now I'm about to shape this, but you actually should not shape this. I realized much later down the road that I should not be shaping it right now because it is going to expand as it warms and gets back to room temperature. So don't shape it now. Instead, just let it, put it in a rough shape and put it on your board here and just let it get to room temperature before you actually shape it. Once you shape it, you will need to put it seam side down on some parchment. I'm about to show you how it's done.
Now at this point, we are going to move our bread loaf onto our parchment paper because we're using an oven, and we're going to take some immediate steps to get started. So you can see that I folded it together. So now we're just gonna very carefully, and actually let me just turn my paper the other side here. We're gonna very carefully fold it onto the paper. And we're just waiting, while we wait for it to come to room temperature, we're gonna do our politics segment. All right, but you don't need to do anything else with it. Just get it on that paper right now. So while we wait for our bread to come to room temperature, what we're going to do is we're going to start preheating our oven. So if you have a Dutch oven, now is the time to put it in your oven. If you don't have a Dutch oven, don't worry. I'm going to tell you how to do what we are going to do with that. First, we have to preheat our oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. So please do that now. When you start preheating process for that, you want to take your Dutch oven and put it in now. If you're using a tray like I'm using, just using a regular size baking tray here, you're going to want to put this in the top layer of your oven right now. If you're using a tray, you want to take a metal pan like this, and you want to put it in the bottom tray of your oven. This will serve as your steamer to make sure that we get a nice hard crust on our bread. So you're going to want to put this in your oven now as well. The reason we're putting these in so far ahead of time is to allow them to preheat, so when we put the bread in, everything will already be hot. So it's going to be really important now that we let this sit and get to room temperature for an hour. It's not going to rise, and don't expect it to. But what we're going to do is just make sure that it is ready to bake when we put it in the oven, because we're just going to take it up by the parchment, drop it onto the tray, put our water in real quick, and then we will just leave it to bake for 40 minutes, okay, at that full 450 degrees. Speaking of water, again, if you're not using a Dutch oven for this, you need to boil some water to put in that bottom tin that we just put in the oven. So if you have an electric kettle, or if you're just doing this over a stovetop, set it to boiling and just start it going. Make sure that you have it set so that you have boiling water by the time we actually get to the end of our segment. So we're going to do some politics now. Set your timers for 1 hour. If you're not sticking around for the politics, then I will see you in an hour. If not, wait 1 second and we will check the whiteboard to see what we're talking about this week.
So now I'm going to attempt to reshape my room temperature bread. Don't do this, it's not going to work. This is why I say in an early video that you should not be doing that. However, once you get it to the appropriate shape using the shaping process I demonstrated earlier, we're going to take this parchment and put it directly on that top baking rack, and we're going to take our boiling water and put it in the bottom rack. Once we do that, we're going to cook it for 40 minutes, and then we will be done. All right, guys, that's it for this week. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.